Welcome, everybody. I know it's 5 o'clock, so thank you very much for joining us this evening for the first in a two-part series. I am going to give everybody just a couple more minutes to gather, and then I will talk you through our program this evening. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to get things kicked off because we have a lot of great stuff to cover with you this evening. So thank you for joining us tonight for the first in a two-part speaker series that we're calling Staying Healthy in the New Year, which seems very apropos. And this evening, we're going to cover the power of plant-based nutrition. So before I introduce our speakers this evening, I'll just make a housekeeping note, which is that this session will be recorded so that we can share it with those that couldn't join us this evening. And because we do have a large number of participants, we're going to have everybody be on mute. I think our administrator, Alex, can do that for us, but also if you could keep yourselves on mute, that would help with background noise and feedback. My name is Samantha Trotman-Berman. I'm chair of the Board of Advisors at BID Needham, but my role this evening is to introduce our speakers and then to moderate a little Q&A at the end. So I'm flattered to be doing this, and I have a lot of personal interest as well in this area, being a little bit of a nutrition nerd myself. And I'm really excited to hear what our speakers have to say and to share with us. What we're going to do is save questions until the end. Feel free, please, to, as we go through, if you think of something that you'd like to discuss, you can enter that into the chat, and myself and Alex will be looking at that as we go through. And then we will also have a way, if you hover over your the bottom of your screen on your Zoom, you can also, under reactions, you can raise a hand at the end as well if you'd like to speak directly, or I will try and pull as many of the questions from the chat as possible at the end. So I'm very happy to be describing our presenters, our speakers this evening. So Dr. Meghan Garcia-Webb is an internal medicine physician who practices primary care at Beth Israel Deaconess Healthcare in Wellesley. She's also certified in lifestyle medicine and has a passion for sharing healthy habits for wellness with her patients. So we're delighted to have her this evening with us, and she's going to speak first. And then many of you on the phone will already know Stacy Madison, who's a member of the Board of Advisors at BID Needham and has been since 2018. She's the founder of 3 companies, including Stacy's Pita Chips, Stacy's Juice Bar, and BeBOLD Bars. So this latest endeavor, BeBOLD Bars, and they're delicious, I have tried them myself, are gluten-free and dairy-free, and they are a whole grain energy bar made with nut butters, oats, chia nuts, maple, and wildflower honey. Stacy lives in Westwood and likes to summer in New Hampshire and Europe. So with that introduction, I'll invite Dr. Garcia-Webb to share some thoughts with us. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Samantha. I'm delighted to be here with all of you, and I'm really delighted to talk with you about plant-based nutrition. I feel so passionate about this. I'm really going to try to keep it to the time limit, but it's very dear to my heart. And as Samantha said, I practice internal medicine and lifestyle medicine in Wellesley at the BI. And you may be wondering, what is lifestyle medicine? And it's a branch of medicine that's developed to take an evidence-based approach to lifestyle therapeutic approaches to prevent, treat, and if we can, reverse lifestyle-related chronic illnesses, which is where a lot of our chronic diseases come from. So it's a holistic approach to medicine, but it's also very rooted in evidence as well. And so the core principles of lifestyle medicine are a whole food plant-based diet, which we'll talk about in just a minute, regular physical activity, sleeping well, stress management, avoiding bringing harmful substances into our lives, and then using other non-medical modalities to improve our health, such as social connectedness, cognitive behavioral therapies, etc. Next slide. Great. So what is a whole food plant-based diet? Well, it's mainly food from plants, so vegetables, fruits, legumes, whole grains, beans, with little to no animal products. And as a side note, I am really excited to be presenting here with Stacy because she's doing some really great things with the BeBOLD Bars. They are minimally processed and very delicious, so I encourage everybody to check them out. And you may be wondering, how is a whole food plant-based diet different from a vegan diet? And it's really kind of the whole food plant-based diet is looking at what can we have more of, as opposed to the vegan diet, which is very strict about what we're trying to avoid, which is animal products. There's a lot of overlap, but I think the whole food plant-based diet leaves a little bit more flexibility for people to find what's comfortable for them. And just gives people a little bit more wiggle room. Next slide. So today I'm going to be going through two main categories. So why you may want to consider a plant-based diet, and secondly, how you can go about doing that. So why would we want to think about eating more plants? To start off, there's so much great literature about this that I can only skim the surface, but if you're interested, it's out there. Plant-based diets help lower the risk of chronic disease, help treat chronic disease, can even reverse chronic disease in some circumstances. They help with hunger signaling and satiety. They help improve insulin sensitivity. They decrease the inflammatory processes in our body, and that's just for starters. So when we're talking about animal versus plant sources, just to go over a few key mechanisms here, when we're thinking about decreasing our cancer risk, we're really talking about boosting our immune system and also lowering those inflammatory insults. And when we're digesting red meat, processed meat, or saturated fat, we're really increasing that inflammation in the body. It's kind of a messy process for the body to handle all the excess metabolites that go on when we're processing those. And then when we're thinking about the heart, we really want to be looking out for saturated fat, because we know that does increase our LDL cholesterol, which is our bad cholesterol, which can lead to an increased risk of heart attack and stroke. And high cholesterol does increase in direct proportion to the amount of meat that we're consuming per day. And I do want to take a pause here and say that when we're thinking about plant-based sources like coconut oil and palm oil, coconut milk, we really want to treat that more as I think of it as a meat or a dairy product, essentially, because the saturated fat content is so high, unlike most other plant-based sources. So just to go over a few of the key landmark studies in support of a plant-based diet, there was a great study called the Portfolio Study that showed that a plant-based diet can have an equivalent effect to statins. A plant-based diet outperformed the traditional American Diabetes Association diet. It's been shown to reverse and prevent some major cardiac events. Among people who eat more plants in their diet, there tends to be a stepwise reduction in their diabetes risk as we go from a non-vegetarian to a vegan diet. And then I always like to look at what else is going on outside our very kind of narrow Western diet. And when we look at other populations that eat mostly plant-based diets, we do see that the incidence of coronary artery disease, the event like heart attacks, are just so much lower. So next slide. And then on the other side, what are some reasons why we may want to reconsider eating meat or as much meat as we do? The Nurses' Health Study showed that eating meat 5 or more times per week was actually linked to an increased risk of diabetes. And I think this is so interesting because we always think of sugar in relation to diabetes, but also how much meat we eat can also impact our risk. And then the Adventist Health Study echoed this with regular meat consumption nearly doubling the risk of diabetes. We know that eating red meat, eating processed meat, increases our risk of colon cancer. And, I think it's so interesting that, years ago, the WHO classified red meat and processed meat as carcinogens, with processed meat being in the same category as tobacco. And I find that gets little to no airplay on our media today, but always, makes me rethink whether I'm going to give my kids processed meat for lunch or things like that. And processed meat, we know, also increases the risk of many other cancers, including gastric cancer. So I want to pause here because I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, this sounds great. Look at all these benefits. I really want to do this, but I have a family. I have people in my house who love meat. I have kids. I have a job. And I put this Australian flag up because I wanted to let you know that I totally hear you. My husband is Australian, and I do feel that some of the cultural stereotypes we have of Australians can be somewhat accurate because there's a very strong link with Australians and loving, being carnivores, which I didn't fully appreciate until we had bought a house a few years ago. And I found my husband on the back deck in March in a snowstorm, setting up our grill, because at some point, months from then, we would be able to grill. And I thought, wow, he really, really loves meat a lot more than I knew. So that's, who I'm living with, a meat lover. And so if you're in the same spot, I totally hear you. So this next part is going to talk a little bit about how you can introduce a more plant-based diet if you're interested in pursuing this, and it doesn't have to be really hard. So when we're thinking about making dietary changes, I do really feel that the perfect is the enemy of the good. And I like to talk with patients about an iterative process as opposed to an all or nothing process, because especially in our society, there's a very heavy influence on diet culture. We tend to like these containers, these structures of like, for 2 weeks, I do this, and then I do this. And it doesn't really integrate well into our daily life. And I think that the best diet or lifestyle of eating is the one that you're going to be able to sustain for a long period of time. And so we want to build momentum with small changes. We don't want to think about all or nothing or having a good day or a bad day or a cheat day. Food doesn't make you a good or bad person, is what I always tell patients. And what I like about the plant-based diet is that we're really thinking about, abundance of things we can have more of, as opposed to what we have to avoid or have less of. And I'm not a fan of the food police or having a lot of kind of mental drama about food changes. I think, we should have fun with food and just be curious. And I think there's a way of bringing more plants into our lives without, even if we have family members who, may not be on the same page as us. So I'll start here with one thing that I think is really helpful if you're thinking about making these changes, is a choose your own protein type of meal. There are just some types of dinners or lunches that really lend themselves to a flexible protein option. So I made rice bowls the other night, big bowl of, brown rice, lots of vegetables, tofu, and then on the side, I did some chicken. And I think there are lots of very low maintenance protein options for people who do eat meat. I mean, I do feel that like poached chicken thighs they're just about indestructible. You just like put them in boiling water, you walk away for about 15 minutes, you come back, they're pretty much done. You can shred them up. And then if you have a family member who eats meat, they can put on as much as they want. And just a note about protein, because I do hear this a lot from patients as well when they're thinking about eating more plants. They're really worried about where is their protein going to come from, which is a valid point. And all protein essentially comes from amino acids, which comes from plants, but animal meat is a very efficient delivery system of protein. We have 20 amino acids. As humans, we can make 11 of them on our own, but we really need to get 9 from our dietary sources. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about complete protein sources, which sources give us all 9 amino acids, and most animal products give us all at once. And then there are some protein sources for plants that are complete sources and some that are not complete. And in general, we want to aim for about 0.3 grams of protein per pound of body weight. And so, so actually we can go to the next slide after this. So animal proteins, as you can see, it's a very efficient delivery system. So just 3 ounces of these meats gives you 25 grams of protein, and these are really complete proteins. And then if we go to the next slide, we can see, these are just some examples of plant-based proteins. Tofu and tempeh have probably the highest, but you can see there's a lot of really alternative, great, complete protein sources. And then just because something is an incomplete source doesn't mean you have to avoid it, and you don't need to get a complete source at every meal. If you're mixing and matching and eating a varied diet, you're going to make up the difference along the day. So a second strategy that I like to try is just starting with one meal. So if you're thinking about moving towards a more plant-based diet, you could say just start with breakfast and continue with your regular diet for the other meals, but you can really focus on making breakfast as plant-based as possible, seeing what works for you. There are some great plant-based dairy alternatives. And then when you feel comfortable, you have a good routine with that, you can add in a second meal. And then another thing I like to think about is there are really some cultures around the world that are very naturally plant-based or mostly plant-based. And this tends to be, I like to look for the cultures around the equator where it's warm. I know there's going to be less dairy, and usually there's a lot of great spices involved as well. And I think that takes a lot of the guesswork out of, creating a flavor profile or what kinds of dishes go together. Because if we're just looking at a certain type of cuisine, it's kind of already done for you. And so things like Ethiopian food, Southern Chinese, Mexican, Southern Indian, these are all great places to start. And also, there's a great website about heritage diets. If you go to this website and check it out, for people who want to bring in kind of a more cultural element to their eating. So I highly recommend looking at that. And then finally, you can start doing a plant-based diet today with what you're eating today. So, and it's really just a matter of adjusting proportions. Looking at, like, let's say you had chicken, potato, and a salad. You can make the salad 50% or 2/3 of your plate, and then the chicken and the potato would be the smaller portion of your meal. And the goal is to really, if you're having animal-based protein, to use it as a seasoning and not the star of the meal. And so let's say your kids want spaghetti with meat sauce. I have done this. They don't know I've done this, but you can, meat is quite flavorful, so you don't need a lot. You can cut down the amount of meat you would normally use. You can increase the vegetables. Usually nobody notices a difference. And then, what do we do for Australian burger night, which happens quite a lot in the summer? And that's really, I'll make a big salad and some oven roasted vegetables. People who really want the burger to be the star can have as much burger as they want. And then I'll have, mostly the vegetarian, and then like you can have a part of a burger to participate, but it doesn't have to be the main focus of the meal. So just to summarize, there's so much evidence out there to support a whole food plant-based diet. So if you're interested, I highly recommend checking it out. It does not have to be overwhelming. I hope these tips can show you that you can start today, you can start tomorrow, and it doesn't have to take over your life. You can think about it in a way of being curious and kind of outside this diet culture that we have in America. And I think it's an easy thing to start on your own or with others if they're interested. And if you're thinking about resources, these are some great books. Food Rules by Michael Pollan, you may have already heard about. The How Not to Die series by Dr. Grieger is very good. The Forks Over Knives is a very well-known documentary about kind of the medical community moving more towards a plant-based diet. There are some great YouTube channels that have these are vegan, but they have great plant-based recipes. And then the Heritage Diet website as well. So come visit us if you're interested. We are BI at Wellesley. I like to think of us as Wellesley Wellness. We're on Washington Street, and we are all very interested in preventive care. I feel very lucky to work with such like-minded physician colleagues. We can go to the next slide. So Dr. Brewer and I are both certified in lifestyle medicine. Dr. Brewer is also additionally certified in obesity medicine, and she does such great work with patients that are interested in pursuing that as well. Dr. Anand is our go-to person for mind and body stress reduction. Dr. Armani has such a wealth of knowledge about hypertension, high cholesterol, how to get that down. I've lost track of the amount of certification she has for that. And Dr. Shashua is our go-to person for men's health and musculoskeletal wellness. And so I invite you all to come see us if you're interested. Here's some references just as a starting point. And thank you all so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Garcia-Webb. That was fantastic. Lots of great information there. I think we're going to try and share the slides with the audience so that they don't have to jot down everything that you said. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of good discussion and more questions at the end, but we'll save those to the end so that we can turn things over to Stacy. But thanks so much for all that.
Am I on? I don't know. I can't see me.
Yeah, you're on.
Can you hear me?
Sounds good, Stacy. Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you, Stacy. Thanks. Yeah, I just was switching over.
Okay. I can't see them, but
You're good.
okay. That's okay. So, I'm going to go over a couple things. I know that in the presentation we talked about, the juice bar, and I miss it terribly. I'm sure a lot of people miss it because a couple of the recipes I'm going to make today are from the juice bar, and it's, I'm going to show you how easy it is to make it at home. And a lot of people ask, what's my top 10 grocery list? So I did assemble some of those things. Obviously, you have lots of berries, apples. Well, those are strawberries, but I got apples over here. I got apples. Yogurt. I know it's dairy, but I do eat a lot of yogurt.
And Stacy, we have that up on the screen too. We have your top 10 grocery items up on the screen.
Oh, you do? So I don't have to actually show you each of those little things. That is great. So I don't have to go through all that. So I'm going to jump straight into some of the recipes that I make, because a lot of people also, and I know Dr. Garcia-Webb said this, because a lot of people feel like, oh, well, if I'm making snacks for the kids or things like that, that they have to be, that, you know, it's gonna be time consuming or they're not gonna like it. Well, since my kids were little, I've been making these silly little things called banana boats, and they are painfully easy. You simply take a banana, peel it, carve it out like a canoe, sort of.
Here, do you want me to get closer?
Yeah, probably. It'd probably be better if you just held the camera, yeah. So you carve it out like it's a canoe, and you can literally do anything else. So what I'm gonna do is I am going to fill it with some nut butter. I have cashew nut butter here. So I'm gonna take this banana. I'm gonna fill this up with some nut butters. This is actually a mixture of cashew nut and macadamia nut butter, but you can put peanut butter, almond butter, whatever you want. And then you can put anything on this. You can take and you can put some, you can put chia, I don't know, chia seeds. My kids always love, I have gluten-free, dairy-free chocolate chips here, a couple of chocolate chips in there. I've got some granola. You can throw some granola on there. You can use a little bit of chia or hemp. If you want to, you can drizzle a little bit of honey on there. But this is really like a simple, easy snack. And if the kids come downstairs, they see this sitting there, they're like, oh, that looks good, and they just chow it down. So there's one recipe. Very, very easy. I'm also going to make our top selling smoothie. And our top selling smoothie was the Green Monster. So it's really easy. I'm going to take this plug in the blender here.
And Stacy, I think we're going to make sure we share all these recipes with everybody too. So you're showing us that they're easy, at least for you. And then we're going to share those recipes.
So I'm going to make the Green Monster. It's more a matter of just having the stuff in the house. So, you know, if you start with, we never put any ice in our smoothies or anything. We chose to freeze our fruit. So you start with 10 ounces of almond milk, you know, some frozen bananas. And I just buy the ones in the bags. Certainly if you have leftover bananas, you can freeze them. A piece of kale. This is my napkin. So, you know, you just peel the stem off, but I just throw whatever. You really don't have to get exact with your measurements. Kale, some spinach. I'm going to go with a couple of tablespoons of almond butter. I love this scoop. If you don't have a scoop, I use my scoop all the time. And then this one is, you just use this, it's a superfood powder. And you just throw in a teaspoon of, this is macrogreens powder. So we throw in a teaspoon of the macrogreens powder. That's all she wrote, right? I'm gonna blend it up. While that's blending, I'm gonna start putting together one of the other recipes too. I'm gonna have the raw vegetable lasagna. So I started layering the veggie lasagna as we as Dr. Garcia-Webb was talking. And all right, now that that's done. I'm doing this raw veggie lasagna as we go, so that we very last. Thanks. you. And this is the Green Monster, again, one of our best-selling smoothies. Really good. I'm gonna give this to our cameraman here. Allie, you can drink it.
Thank you.
I've had it before.
The perk of the job.
So we have our Green Monster smoothie, and I know a lot of you are already familiar with that. So our raw veggie lasagna is made with, it's basically like a lasagna. It's layered with zucchini, tomato, and then 3 spreads, which I made in advance. But I'm going to show you how to make each one of these. Definitely easier if you prep everything in advance. My food processor. So we're going to start with the cashew nut spread. And this has, the recipe should be on there. It's cashews, pine nuts, garlic, olive oil, lemon juice, apple cider vinegar, salt, and warm water. So we're going to start with our nuts. And so I took and I soaked the pine nuts and the olive oil. I'm sorry, the pine nuts and the cashews. I soaked it. Do you know where the center thing is? I soaked it for a little while in the refrigerator, so they got soft enough to blend. Have a blade in there. So I'm going to mix together. These are both the cashews and the pine nuts. I'm going to blend that together. And this one's probably the hardest of the 3, but that's why I'm starting with it. Garlic, the olive oil, the lemon juice, and the apple. So we are going to throw in a clove of garlic. I'm going to throw the salt right in there. Some salt. I made some fresh lemon juice. Have it. Tablespoon of lemon juice, tablespoon of olive oil, tablespoon of olive oil, yeah, tablespoon of olive oil. And then apple cider vinegar and the salt, which I already put in.
That's a teaspoon.
This one is a teaspoon. I'm just gonna eyeball it, right? Just for speed. Okay, and we're just gonna blend it all together. So the consistency, like a paste. And then I have a half a cup of water that I'm just gonna add just to like thin it out a little. And you don't have to add all of this. Just kind of put it in until it gets to be the consistency you're looking for. Yeah, I'm gonna add it all. And it kind of depends on how soft your, I can say this, how soft your nuts are. Depends how soft your nuts are. And then as you go through, it helps if you scrape it down and reblend it, but you get the idea. So I had already made it in advance. Then we're going to, I should have emptied that. We're going to make another one. We're going to make the Kale Pistachio Pesto. One thing to know about the Kale Pistachio Pesto, and as she's rinsing my blender there, I'm gonna layer some more on here. But with this pesto, it's great as you can put it like into a hummus recipe. Like when we made our Kale Pistachio hummus, we used to just take our hummus and just mix in this, and voila, you got a different kind of hummus. You can also use it on a sandwich or as a spread. There's lots of ways to use it if you have it around the house. The other thing is when you're making the cashew and some of these other spreads, you can freeze them. Just put them in an airtight container, date it, and then once you take it out of the, put it in smaller batches. Once you take it out of the freezer, you can use them, usually within a week. and they're totally fine. That's why I like to make the batch, put it in the freezer, and then just take it out. Now you're gonna take and you're gonna layer. You're gonna take your zucchini, your tomatoes, your spreads, and you're gonna put it into the into any kind, like a 9x9 pan or any kind of pan that you want. And you're gonna layer it in the order of zucchini, tomato, and then the sauces. Sometimes I even take in the center and you can put a little drizzle of olive oil in there. And then you're gonna do it again. I am not gonna show you how to slice zucchini, but just make it nice and thin. And I like to do it, so if I did one this way, then I turn it around and do the second layer, you know, go in the other direction or like this. The other thing that's really important with this recipe is to rotate your sauces. So when you take a bite, you don't want, you know, all a bite of one spread. So as you do a couple of rows of this, you know, go rotate it out, like go red, white, green, you know, red, green, white. And I always forget the tomatoes, but you know, and then you get the idea. You put the layer of the tomatoes on top of the zucchini, should be first, but it is all going to the same place. So if it's not totally neat, it doesn't matter. The only thing is just rotate your ingredients. And this makes a great meal. I guarantee the kids are going to come upstairs and they'll eat it. I mean, certainly if you wanted to put something else in here, I wouldn't. I wouldn't put ground turkey or anything like that because the idea is that it's raw. These spreads have a ton of flavor. And as it sits, it gets even better. Like it gets a little bit gushier. And you can push it down and you can see how it starts to kind of come together from the side. And it makes a great lasagna. So this one's super easy. The Kale Pistachio Pesto. This is the green one. Basically, you're gonna put the nuts in there. But I have a bunch of kale and spinach. The recipe's on there. I'm sorry, kale and basil. They just do the recipe.
I'm sorry?
They just do the recipe.
I think, yeah, probably in her kitchen at home, I would imagine.
Olive oil. Throw the top on this. Make sure you give it a little scrape down. Look in there. Can you see that, Allie? Can you show them that? Yeah. Yummy. And this, I wish you could smell it because it smells so good because there's a ton of fresh basil in there. Put that, make it keep scraping down the side. I mean, look at that. Doesn't that look beautiful? And then the third one we're gonna make, sorry, I didn't get that. I'm gonna do one more layer while we get the food processor back. Third one we're gonna make is the sun-dried tomato. With this one, you see it kind of is a weird color because I had two different jars. One of them was organic and one of them wasn't organic. But you drain the jar, you drain the oil out and you put a little bit aside and then you're gonna put that in. And this is a recipe that's in the cookbook because we did write a little recipe book and there's a mistake in it. So it says you put the oil aside, but it doesn't exactly say, and then it says add oil, but you add back the sun-dried tomato oil that you set aside. That's what you put back into the recipe. And you know what? If you screw it up and you just put olive oil or any other kind of oil or no oil, it's okay. It's just going to be a little bit thinner or thicker. So we have our sun-dried tomatoes. I threw this all in a bowl together. This is red onion, lemon juice, fresh chopped tomatoes are in there. This is the sun-dried tomato oil I set aside. And some salt And optional is the red pepper flakes. I like to put it in there because it just gives it a little bit more flavor. And we're gonna throw this once again back into the food processor.
Right here.
Oh, thanks.
Mhm.
And since this is all going in the same lasagna, we're not gonna get too picky about if it makes So the first thing you're gonna do is make sure you chop up the sun-dried tomatoes. And these sun-dried tomatoes soaked for a couple of hours. If you can soak them overnight, just in water, it makes it a lot easier and the consistency gets a lot smoother. But if you can't do it overnight, then you can certainly just do it for a few hours. You're gonna add the rest of the items, the red onion, the fresh lemon juice, tomatoes. I'm gonna throw the olive oil right in there, the salt and the pepper flakes. I like to use Malden sea salt flakes. I like myself, so I like to use flaky salt. And again, if the texture isn't, actually the texture is pretty good. Do this one more time. All right, let me go back to our lasagna. I'm gonna do one more layer. Slices of zucchini because I want to fill this all the way up to the top. And fresh tomato. Can you pass me another tomato? It's right under the book. Thank you. I actually use okay, at the juice bar, we would butt the tomato, right? So you just take out that part, and then all of these pieces, the front end and the tail end, we would use those. Those are great to use in your, when you're making your spread. So therefore you're using the entire tomato. I'm gonna finish this off here just to make it look pretty. If I had a few slices, pieces of basil, I would stick that on there too. I have a few sprigs of spinach. That's some tomato, and then I'll just top it off with another scoop, and it's done. If you want to make it a little bit more colorful, you can certainly sprinkle on a little bit of paprika. I can't find it. Or something just to give it a little more color. But look at this. Nice, huh? And again, the recipe's in the book. So we're gonna set that aside. And the last thing we're gonna, how am I doing on time?
You're good.
I'm good? Okay. So I do want to show you this one. It's overnight oats. Another thing. The kids come downstairs, they open the refrigerator, they see these bad boys, and they're like, oh, can I eat that? Yes, you can eat that. So it's really easy. And not only that, you don't use a lot of dishes. So I use one of these little quart containers because it leaves a lot of room for mixing. So the first thing you do is you throw in a yogurt, and you can use any yogurt. This one happens to be a mixed berry. Spatulas.
Here.
Spatula. Thank you. So I'm going to throw in a mixed berry. And then using this exact same cup, and I hope somebody's timing me because this really takes like 1 minute to make. So using the exact same cup, we're going to put in, again, any kind of milk you want to use. You want to use almond milk, you want to use the vanilla almond milk, cashew milk, soy milk, whatever. I like to use a nut milk. Throw that in. And you're going to mix the yogurt milk. And then using the same container, throw in some oats, fresh oats. And a tablespoon of chia seeds, black seeds, white seeds, whatever. And that just helps thicken it up. Scoop this out through there. And you really stick it in a quart and just do this. Take time on mixing. And you can put anything in this. You can layer it with nut butter. You can put berries. If you want to go back to those chocolate chips, you can do the chocolate chips. I'm just going to make one. So it's just yogurt. Ooh, it does make a lot. So I usually make 2 out of 1. So I didn't have another glass. So you just put it in. I put jam on this one. You can put berries, seeds, whatever you like. You can kind of poke them down there so that they're throughout. Doesn't matter. Slices of banana are good. Put it in the refrigerator, let it sit overnight, and that's it. Did I do all my recipes?
Yes, but talk about the bars.
Oh, bars. Yeah. You know what? These are great to put on there too. And these bars actually have everything in it. So if you're making an overnight oat, let's put it in this glass. And we're doing this again, right? If you're making an overnight oat and you take one of these bars, it has everything you would add to it anyway, right? You'd have you'd have almond butter, nuts, chia, oats. You just crumble this out, and we'd like to say, go ahead and crush it. Crush it up if it's room temperature. And you can throw some of these in there. Got little baby chocolate chips in this one. I mean, that is going to be really good. There's some maple, some wildflower honey in there. I know somebody out there wants to eat this. You can put a few more chocolate chips on there. I mean, look at that. Yum. My cameraman, camera woman wants to eat it. And then I think that's it. So, yeah, we have the bars. They're available.
Stacy, do you throw those in the fridge overnight?
Yes, you throw it in the fridge overnight. They're ready by morning. And the great thing is, I mean, literally, I didn't even dirty a dish. You take it and any yogurt, you use strawberry yogurt, blueberry yogurt, mixed berry yogurt, plain yogurt, vanilla yogurt, doesn't matter. You yeah, you take this, you use this as your measuring cup, and that's kind of one of the things that I like so much about this recipe, because you can just make it really quickly. And if you go to BeBoldBars.com, the bars are available there. My Instagram is @_ Stacy Madison. And you know, we're also going to offer a discount code for all of the Beth Israel. I'm working with Sam on this, but the Beth Israel, the staff, the hospital, the employees. And if you enter code BIDN, then you'll get 25% off. So that's going to be an ongoing thing, just something special that we can do for the hospital. And yeah, that's all. I'm gonna eat
Terrific, Stacy. Thank you. I was one of the many people that were giving out frozen turkeys to staff for Thanksgiving, to celebrate Thanksgiving, and Stacy had dropped off some of her BeBOLD bars, and those were very quick to go. I would say faster than the frozen turkeys. And everybody said,
it's an interesting combo.
It is. It is. And we didn't get that approved by Dr. Garcia-Webb before we rolled that out, but everybody loved grabbing the bars, and also everybody also knew and thought very highly of Stacy, which it was really fun to be handing those out. So appreciate that. So,
thank you.
Well, thank you for all of that.
More bars too.
That's
We're
terrific.
gonna load
That's
you guys
awesome. That's fantastic. Thank you. And I don't know whether I feel inspired or overwhelmed, but I'm going to choose inspired. And I really appreciated the last one where there weren't many dishes to clean up afterwards. So that's great. So
Yeah, the raw veggie lasagna is a little bit more complex, but if you make the spreads in advance, put them in a container and freeze them, it makes the whole process a lot easier. And you don't have to use zucchinis and tomatoes. You can get creative. If you do eat pasta, you can put any kind of pasta in there. You can do chickpea pasta. So it doesn't matter. You can also use the pesto as anywhere you would use just a regular pesto. So this one just is a base of kale, pistachio, spinach. So you can really get creative with them. You can take, if you're having a party or something, you can take to do a cream cheese spread, you can take like a little bit of cream cheese and you can put the sun-dried tomato one over there because it's got a lot of flavor on it. So you can kind of smear that on top or layer it. You can do anything with these.
that's terrific. Thank you. I know I'm going to open the floor to questions either through the chat or you can hover over the bottom of your Zoom screen and put your hand up and we can unmute you. But we did have some pre-registered questions. I had a quick question for you, Stacy, just as you were doing the recipes. Could you repeat what the powder was that you use in the Green Monster smoothie?
Yeah, it's macro greens. I know my label is a little bit torn up.
It looks like it's been well used. Do you?
Yeah, it's a big jug. But you know, this stuff is great. It's you know, it's a good way to get in some extra. I don't know how Dr. Garcia-Webb, maybe she has an opinion on some of these powders, but you know, look, you add protein powders to some of your stuff, but I and a lot of plant-based protein powders that are out there, like whey bothers me. So I always use the plant-based powders, but this is just all grains and it's like dried grains. So you can put this in and it's a great addition and it adds nutrition to all of your smoothies. And the Green Monster is just a great one. Everybody loved it. It was our #1 smoothie. So nobody even asked or knew what it was that was in there. So, but you know, it was good for you.
No, that's terrific. That's helpful. And those macro greens, obviously you can mix them in. And are there any
It's
other
made by Macro Life
supplements?
is the company. It's Macro Life Naturals is who makes it.
Is the company. Awesome.
Yeah.
One of the pre-registered questions that we had, Dr. Garcia-Webb, along those lines is, are there any particular supplements that you like to see or you advise folks to take if they're adopting a plant-based diet?
That is such a great question, and I'm glad they asked because I did want to mention that if people are really more towards the very vegan end of a plant-based diet, you do want to make sure you're taking a B12 supplement because that is something that is just it, unless you're consciously eating fortified B12 fortified foods or like nutritional yeast, you're just not going to get what you need from that. So that's easy to take. You know, very available over the counter. And then usually I tell people, you know, calcium and vitamin D are the only other supplements I think just for anybody to make sure they're getting enough of. But if you're eating a plant-based diet, the nice thing is you're getting a lot of those nutrients anyway. So you could take a multivitamin or you could skip it. I don't have a very strong opinion either way, just the B12.
So Dr. Garcia-Webb, just so that people know what nutritional yeast looks like.
Yeah.
That's it. And you can kind of substitute it for cheese or it's really easy to use. You can sprinkle it on stuff. I like the liquid vitamin D, but this is what we used to use in smoothies at the juice bar.
Terrific, thank you. Another question that we had on the pre-registration for the speaker series was about the plant-based offerings, sort of like as the different burgers and things like that that are sort of trying to be like something we used to know as meat. You know, the Beyond Burgers and things like that. What's your feeling about some of those options?
That's another great question. I think the plant-based meat is going to be really great, you know, from an environmental perspective, and you know, certainly from like a meat processing kind of industrial food chain. I think, you know, that solves a lot of issues. You know, for me, it still definitely falls under the category of a highly processed food. And I think such is the case with all meat substitutes. You know, we have the meat or meat substitute like sausages and chicken fingers that aren't chicken. So I still probably would, you know, minimize my intake of such highly processed foods. And certainly not something that I would advocate having daily, but I think is a nice alternative if you are out and you wanted to try something different, just with the awareness that it is processed.
A little bit of a balance with
Yeah.
with that, as with everything, it sounds like. Yeah, terrific. Thank you. Well, we've had so much good content that are coming up a little bit on time, but if we do have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions, if anybody would either like to throw that into the chat or raise a hand. Have a thank you, which is great. It was really helpful to have the 2 sort of views, one, you know, more of a medical view, and then Stacy's very practical view. And I love the kid-friendly part of it as well. And then Alex, I think how are we gonna share the recipes with folks? Did that already go out, or how are we allowing people to see those recipes?
I'll follow up with an email to event participants, which includes a link to the video recording as well as the slide deck, so you can have the recipes on hand.
Okay, terrific. That's really helpful. And I know Dr. Garcia-Webb did show it in her presentation, but we're also going to share on the chat, and that could also be in the email, the phone number for her practice. And if you're interested in going to see Dr. Garcia-Webb or any of her colleagues, if you are already a patient of that practice, we thank you for trusting BILH with your care. And the Wellesley practice is actually accepting new patients, which is a little unusual these days. We're also going to place in the chat Samantha Sherman's email. Sam is actually on the call right now, and she's the Vice President of Philanthropy at BID in Needham. She's an excellent liaison between our community, our patients, and our clinicians. So if you ever have a need, please reach out to Sam, and she will be able to direct you in the correct direction for any clinical care. And finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the second part of this wellness series, which is about achieving mental well-being. And that's going to spotlight the behavioral health resources that are available, and the Trotman Director of Behavioral Health, Jennifer Pinto, who is going to be leading the discussion. That's going to be on March 24th. So please mark that in your calendars. You'll be able to learn about the resources that are currently available and ones that we are also putting in place for the community, and also some exercises in mindfulness and ways to help yourself with your own mental health in the meantime. So I think, unless we have any other comments or questions, I am going to close out our evening and thank everybody very much for joining us. And thank you again to our speakers and our presenters and demonstrators. And we'll see you hopefully on the next of our speaker series. Thanks so much and good evening.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye, Mom.